sexually assaulted 16 female students at the University of Southern California. The sexual assault allegations involve young women who went to a campus health center for annual exams and other treatment between 2009 and 2016. My office charged Dr. Tyndall with 18 counts of sexual penetration and 11 counts of sexual battery by fraud. If he is convicted as charged, Dr. Tyndall faces up to 53 years in state prison. I want to thank the Los Angeles Police Chief Michael Moore, as well as Billy Hayes, the head of the Robbery Homicide Division, and all of the detectives who worked on this case. I want to thank my deputy district attorneys assigned to my unit. Most importantly, Deputy DA Reinhold Mueller. These prosecutors and detectives have spent many months working together on this very large and complex investigation. Together, they've built a compelling criminal case against Dr. Tyndall. As with every criminal case we file, the evidence against a defendant must meet our filing standard of proof beyond a reasonable doubt. The case here involves 16 courageous women whose allegations fall within the statute of limitation and whose accounts have been corroborated. The LAPD continues to interview victims and investigate allegations. To date, they have presented more than 130 crime reports involving Dr. Tyndall to my office. We will review each allegation presented to us. However, it is important to understand that some offenses may fall outside of the statute of limitations. In other words, they may be too old to file, and some accounts may lack sufficient evidence to support a criminal case filing. A team of experienced prosecutors continues to review the allegations against Dr. Tyndall and will determine if additional charges are warranted. Among our primary concern is treating these young women with the utmost dignity and ensuring that they have the support necessary to face the defendant in a court of law. I commend these women for coming forward. I understand that this experience has been emotionally devastating and that the months-long investigation has been frustrating at times. To that end, you have my word that my office will not rest until justice is served in this case. Thank you. And now I believe Chief Moore.
Yes. Ms. Lacey, thank you very much. And let me begin by framing my remarks of this year-long investigation would not have been possible without the full and unbridled cooperation and support of the Los Angeles District Attorney's Office. In starting this investigation also, it was dependent upon and reliant that the University of Southern California would cooperate and provide information as allowed and as requested. And I must say, again, their cooperation on this has been appreciated, and we look forward to that continuing in the days ahead. As has been described, over this past year, we've had 12 full-time detectives from our elite robbery homicide division assigned to this full-time. This was their single task, was to do and initiate an outreach to women that had been involved, who had been victimized by Dr. Tyndall. More than 350 women stepped forward courageously, as DA Lacey indicated, and offered information. Detectives traveled to more than 16 states to conduct the vast majority of those interviews in person in an effort both to support these survivors but also to gain firsthand the best information possible and learning and demonstrating the proof necessary to prevail in a criminal prosecution against this man. That travel also included gathering evidence and supporting documents and supporting information that allowed us to seek out and obtain photographic evidence, video evidence, computer and digital evidence that required, again, thousands of hours of these detectives reviewing, going through and identifying relevant information for the prosecution. I'm proud of the quality of the work that's been done to this point, and I look forward to the ongoing work that's before our detectives. While what has been stated again is more than 135 cases have been presented, we fully anticipate that this District Attorney's Office, as they move through those cases, will be asking for and seeking additional information, which we will make the effort to provide. Additionally, I believe that each of the women that have stepped into this, we owe a debt of their courage. These are events that traumatize women, with the 16 that have been identified in the criminal complaint, aging between 17 and 29 years of age, whose lives I sorrowfully believe have been forever changed by the trauma and by the assault that this man brought. And so their courageousness of stepping in to this conversation and allowing us to gather evidence against him, I value. This morning, robbery homicide detectives went to his residence of Dr. Tyndale in the Mid-Wilshire, and as he exited his apartment, took him into custody. At that point, we also discovered that on his person was a loaded .38 caliber 2-inch revolver. He was, in taking into custody without further incident, complained of chest pains, and is currently at a nearby hospital receiving treatment for those complained of injuries. It is our intention, upon him being medically cleared to be booked and processed, that such will occur, and his bail has been set, is my understanding, at $2.1 million. In closing, I want to say that there is much more work yet to be done, but I am proud of the work, again, that our men and women have accomplished in teamwork with the District Attorney's Office, and I'm confident that these charges are going to bring some level of justice to our victims. I look forward to the aggressive work going forward. And lastly, there are many more questions that you're going to ask today that we're not going to provide, because there's information that has not been discussed that will remain for trial and the appropriate judicial proceedings, as this man deserves the same due process rights as anyone else. And with this, we'll take any questions. Yes?
Chief, are you able to bring any, you spoke about USC's cooperation, but are you able to bring any criminal charges against the universities for covering up so long?
So over the course of our one-year investigation, we have not, to this point, identified any criminal allegations against the university for obstructing justice or interfering with our criminal investigation.
Chief, was there any indication that he was suicidal? You said he had a gun, chest pains. Any indication that?
I have no information that this man posed a risk or is being suicidal or otherwise despondent.
Why the gun?
That's one of our questions of him.
Did he have a permit for the gun?
I have no information that he has a permit for that weapon.
Can you talk about the length?
I don't believe, in fact, let me go further. I don't believe he has a permit for that weapon. To carry a concealed weapon on your person in the city of Los Angeles is a very highly restricted activity, and Dr. Tyndale does not, in my belief, have such a permit.
Can you talk about the length of the investigation? The victim this morning told me that she's just wondering why it took over a year. The DA wants to respond.
Well, let me do this in concert with the district attorney. The investigation of sexual assaults is one that has to balance the rights and individual the rights of everyone involved. And as stepping forward, making these allegations, these are not rushes to judgment. We get one shot at this. We get one shot at proving these cases and building these cases. And the concept of, and I understand as victims and survivors of sexual assault, the desire to have this done, and they've waited so long. But our investigators, and why this was given to robbery homicide, is that they methodically and systematically go through these investigations anticipating defenses, anticipating and recognizing that what will happen in a court of law is much more than what happens at a point of arrest. So I'm proud of the work that they have invested, and I'm confident with the district attorney filing these first 16 cases that that's demonstrative that the task of what we've given robbery homicide detectives to do is being met. And I'll defer Now to Ms. Lacey.
Thank you. Well, I think the chief explained it. If you can imagine, many of these women who had been to the center had moved on. They'd graduated, moved on, maybe moved back to another state, and just identifying them, locating them. Also, with regard to sex crimes, there's a lot that goes into that investigation. The prosecutors who are assigned have to have training on how to interview a victim of a sex crime, and that includes establishing a rapport with that victim of trust, of not rushing the victim to tell her story, of making sure she has plenty of time to tell that story, and then going through and corroborating what the story is, looking at medical records, tapes, if it exists, things of that nature. And then finally, if you think about this case, it is unusual in that it involves a doctor who is trained to examine a woman's genitals and finding a witness who will withstand cross-examination and who has impeccable credentials to be our witness to say that the behavior that was exhibited was not the standard practice for a gynecologist, but rather one that involves someone who is sexually assaulting women. So it was not an easy case by any stretch of the imagination. And with there being so many women who came forward, and who knows, as by virtue of this filing, there may be more, we really wanted to go through and methodically interview these victims, treat them with dignity, make sure that their rights were protected, that if there was any support that they needed, also to have that done. In this case, I don't know if there are victims or witnesses who might have needed a translator. I mean, there's a lot that goes into it. But we've been working very, very hard on figuring out which of these cases is ready to be prosecuted. And we decided when we reached a certain number, notwithstanding we still have a lot more to do in the investigation of the wide range of cases, that it was time to seek justice, at least for the cases that we could get ready by today's date.
Jackie, can you talk about, I'm guessing that the defense attorneys are probably going to say something like, perhaps some of the women's accounts have been tainted by all the coverage in the story. So how do you overcome that challenge in the legal setting?
Right. That's where the training of our sex crimes prosecutors, such as Mr. Mueller, come into effect. We obviously know that this case was covered very widespread, and you let the victim tell her story. You don't suggest it, and of course you look to see if there were any fresh complaints, and often there are, to friends or roommates or parents at the time. And so that is part of the challenge, that the amount of coverage that this case got. But we're confident that the evidence will show that the 16 victims in this complaint can be corroborated, and that we believe that in the end we have enough evidence to prove beyond a reasonable doubt that with regard to this case that we filed, that we'll be able to prove it and overcome it. I certainly hope so. We've had a lot of experience with victims of sexual assault, with getting children ready to testify. Oh, I couldn't tell you.
So the clock stops, it's not running right now because he's hospitalized?
Well, I think it's going to be up to the court. Normally, when some medical issue, a court makes a finding that there's good cause to continue the case. I don't have enough information to speculate about when the defendant in this case will be well enough to come to court.
They presented 100, we filed 16, is that correct?
For now.
And can you characterize what was the difference between the cases you chose to prosecute versus the ones you didn't?
Well, what I will say is it would be incorrect to assume that because those other victims weren't filed on, that they may not be filed on in the future. It's just a matter of getting evidence together to prove those cases. Now, some of those other victims, their assaults took place outside of the statute, and of course, that would be a bar. The statute of limitations basically says that you have to file, well, you want to know the actual number. I believe it is 10 years. It is 10 years. So some are outside that 10-year statute of limitations. So obviously, those cases we would not be able to file unless we can somehow prove that some of the sexual assault. Now, that doesn't mean we wouldn't use those witnesses, because as you know, with sexual assault, you can introduce outside of the statute of limitations to assist the current case that is in the statute of limitations, yeah.
Do you think more charges are likely?
I know this sounds like a lawyer answer. I would think, based on the volume that is still left, that charges are likely, but I don't know until we actually get the evidence together.
Can I ask Captain Gaze a quick question?
No.
You had 12 detectives full-time on this for a year?
That's correct.
How many detectives do you have? Isn't that like significant?
If I'm standing here in front of Chief Moore, I'll say not enough, but
That
I
seems like a
ha-
very high number.
in the command, I have 50 detectives. So I put most of my special assault section on the case. And as was indicated by the chief, those 12 detectives did interviews, and they traveled to over 16 states and Canada to do those in-person interviews. And of the 387, I'd say about 95% of those were actual in-person. Some of the people did not want to do an in-person interview. And some of them, the statements that were made to us indicated that he made what I would classify as vulgar statements to them, but didn't do anything that would rise to a criminal level. So some of those we did telephonically.
Based on what Tyndall's attorneys have said, it kind of sounded like this came as a surprise, the arrest this morning. So I'm wondering if you guys thought he was a flight risk and, did it that way rather than arranging a self-surrender.
No, I think the issue is we worked with the district attorney's office to determine and when the cases were ready to be filed and a warrant would be in the system. He's committed egregious acts, and we wanted to ensure that we were able to arrest him on our timetable and take him in and address the crimes that were in front of him. And this was the most appropriate way to do it.
One of the victims says she's been fearful for a year that he's been out, and she's afraid that she was going to bump into him somewhere. If he makes bail, what are the concerns that could actually happen?
If that individual has that significant of a concern and they can prove that he's been anywhere near them, then we would assist them in getting a restraining order. Or we've developed a relationship with each one of the victims. Each of the investigators has talked to them, given them private cell phone numbers so that they can constantly contact them. So if that fear became more egregious in that individual, we would certainly assist them in addressing it.
And why the cutoff at 16? Why not wait for a nice round number like 20 or 25? What's the impetus for doing this now, today, these 16 cases?
I believe both the chief and the district attorney addressed it. We've gotten to a point where we've been going through the investigation. This has been a year long, as previously indicated. And in June of last year, we got the information. We came to the media shortly thereafter, and we originally only had 22 young ladies that had come forward. After that, until February of this year, we were continuing to get phone calls up to 387. And we've interviewed all of those people. We put that information forward to the district attorney's office, and they felt that, as has been indicated, that they had compelling cases in 16 of those cases. As we have an obligation to take him into custody on those cases, and we'll continue to develop the evidence as requested by the district attorney's office as to build those other cases as they go along. But we obviously have a gentleman out there that was responsible for 16 violent crimes, in my opinion, and he needed to go to jail to address those in the court system.
Last two questions, please. Last two questions.
Can you comment on the digital or electronic computer evidence did you find anything significant in his hard drives and all that?
We've had this discussion before, but I'll reiterate it. We served a total of, I believe it was 6 search warrants. As you're well aware, we served 2 search warrants originally, shortly after we got the case. Both of those were at his physical residence, and then a storage facility that we were able to identify that was associated with him. The remaining 4 search warrants were warrants that we served on the University of Southern California to obtain medical records and other information related to potential victims that were required to by law so that the school could give us those information. As you indicated, when we went into the house, we retrieved photographs, and we recovered probably approximately 1,000 videos that I would describe as homemade sex tapes that appear to have been done outside the United States. We found
Say outside the United States?
That's correct. We also found photographs of some women that appeared to be in compromising positions that looked like they might have occurred in the course and scope of his employment. We worked with the district attorney and took the woman's photo out of it and tried to identify them as to potential victims. We've worked through that. And then there are computers that we recovered that we're still in the process of analyzing some of the material on those.
Last one.
Is he the only one that's being charged in this matter?
That's correct. He's the only one that perpetrated these crimes.
Thank you.
Thank you very
Thank
much.
you.